how to bias bind off. This video is going to show you how to bind off smoothly to avoid stair steps. You get those stair steps if you bind off stitches over multiple rows. And this happens, it's the same technique whether you're on the right side or the wrong side. You would use this if you were knitting bottom up, and you would use this along the neckline edge and also to slope the shoulders. I'm going to show you on each edge of this swatch, more like you would use it on shoulders, but it's exactly the same technique whether you are working it on a neckline or shoulders, edges, any place you want a nice sloped bind off instead of the stair steps. So we're going to work with the instructions, bind off 3 stitches at the beginning of the next 8 rows. And the initial bind off is normal. So we're going to bind off 3 stitches. Oh, wait. Bound off 1, 2, and bind off number 3. So 3 bound off normally. And now we're going to knit all the way to the other edge. These first bind offs are normal. And you can't bind off at the end of a row. You have to bind off at the beginning of rows. So we're going to knit all the way to the end and then bind off the initial 3 on the other edge. We've got a tutorial on the website called How to Knit a Tidy Neckline, and that'll show you what this looks like on a neckline edge. It's exactly the same technique, whether you are doing it at shoulders or neckline. So again, 3 normal bind offs. So there's the first one, number 2, and number 3. And now we're going to purl across, and this is where the bias bind off kind of kicks in. You're going to purl across, and if you were in pattern, you would work in whatever your stitch pattern is. We're doing purl because I'm just doing stockinette. It doesn't matter whether you're working in pattern. This technique does not change. So before you turn to bind off your next set of 3 stitches, we're going to slip that last stitch unworked. So there you go. Slip it straight across without twisting it. Turn your work. And now we're ready for our next set of 3 stitches. So the way we're going to start this is we're going to slip the first 2 stitches. So there's 1, 2, pull the first one over the second, and there's your first bind off. The next 2 bind offs are normal. Knit, pull over, that's number 2. Knit, pull over, that's number 3. You've bound off 3 stitches, and you can already see you don't have that stair step. You have a nice clean line there. And that's the trick. So we're going to knit over to the next edge, and again, it's the same thing. We're going to knit over and just slip that last stitch unworked. So there we go. Straight across, turn your work. Same thing. You're going to slip those first 2 stitches. 1, 2. Pull the first over the second. And there's the first bind off. The next 2 are normal, so purl and pull over. That's 2. Purl, pull over number 3. And then purl back. And you want to try and keep these stitches kind of tidy and neat. Keep them from stretching out too much, and that'll neaten that neckline too, or that bind off. So again, slip the last stitch, turn, and slip the first 2. So when you work these, kind of keep them close to the needles. Don't stretch them out too much. Pull the first over the second. There's your first bind off. So knit, pull over, there's your second. Knit, pull over, there's the third. Kind of keep them tidy and neat. Knit over to the last stitch. Again, we're going to knit to the last stitch, slip it straight across, turn your work, and slip the first two. Purlwise straight across and pull the first over the second. First bind off. Next two are normal. So at the beginning or at the end of the row, it's slip one, turn your work, and slip two. If you can kind of keep that in your head. This is easier to memorize. And then we'll purl over to the last stitch, slip, and I'll show you how this looks. So you can see if this were a sweater and these were the shoulders, you'd have those nice sloped lines. And again, it's the exact same technique if you were working a neckline. It's much easier to pick up along that nice clean edge to finish a neckline. Or if you're seaming, if this were shoulders and you were seaming, it's much easier to seam that without the stair steps. That's how you work a bias bind off.